You're slumped in a dimly lit break room of a logistics company, clutching a shift schedule dampened by coffee stains. The 3 a.m. air is thick with the scent of cheap motor oil and the ozone of overloaded transformers. As a night shift data entry clerk for this cross-border warehouse, your life was supposed to be a loop of endless monotony, much like the creaking conveyor belt outside. You make a measly $2,800 a month, just enough to cover your mother's dialysis and the rent on your leaky apartment. Until that forklift knocked over the wooden crate marked Precision Instruments. You walked over, intending to check for damage, but under the cold beam of your flashlight you didn't see circuit boards or lenses. Instead, white powder seeped from the cracks, vacuum-sealed in translucent bags. You froze. Growing up in this neighborhood, you knew exactly what that powder meant. More importantly, you knew what happened to people who saw things they weren't supposed to in a logistics hub owned by the boss. Marcos, the floor supervisor, appeared behind you out of nowhere. His clouded eyes locked onto yours, his right hand already drifting toward the heavy object at his hip. You realized that if you showed panic, tried to run, or even thought about calling the cops, your body would be in the pier's incinerator within 5 minutes. You didn't flinch. You looked Marcos dead in the eye, pointed at the ruptured crate, and spoke with a chilling detachment. "The packaging is too flimsy. This seal will outgas and trigger the sensors on the high-heat customs scanners. If you want me to shut up, I can tell you how to bypass next week's surprise inspection. Or you can pull the trigger now." Marcos's hand stalled. He saw the cold-blooded calm of a man pushed to the edge by poverty, and a pathological familiarity with the rules of logistics. He didn't shoot. Instead, he handed you a thick envelope containing $5,000 in cash. "Report to my private office on Monday," he said. You took the envelope, feeling its weight. You stepped out into the rain, glancing back at that mediocre warehouse one last time. In that moment, the humble clerk was dead. You had stepped into the shadows, and there was no turning back. At first, you were just a route planner. You were still sitting at a computer, but you weren't processing spare parts or sundries anymore. You were moving dangerous assets known as white goods. You discovered that this world wasn't as chaotic as outsiders imagined. It was a cold, hyper-precise commercial machine. Your daily task was to analyze custom shift patterns, shipping container blind spots, and the patrol radii of local police. Your first life-or-death decision came 3 months in. A shipment worth $4 million was seized at the border, and everyone argued for cutting their losses. You pulled the financial records of the inspecting officer and found he had just made a hefty down payment on a bone marrow transplant for his daughter. Instead of sending a hitman to threaten him, you made a massive donation to that hospital through an offshore shell company, leaving his badge number in the donor column. 3 hours later, the cargo cleared customs. Marcos dropped a pair of keys on your desk, the keys to your first armored SUV. You were no longer the poor kid weaving through slums on a second-hand bike. You had been promoted to management as a tactical coordinator. With the promotion, your salary jumped to $500,000 a year, but that money came with a price. You began to understand that the real currency of power isn't dollars, it's debt. You made sure everyone owed you. The cops, the judges, even the accountants of your competitors. You built an invisible hierarchy, and your subordinates' fear stemmed from your utter unpredictability. You set new rules. Anyone who stole even a gram during transport would have a fragment of bone of equal weight sent to their family. You weren't a sadist, you were just hedging risk. Soon, you weren't satisfied with just managing routes. You submitted a report to the board, suggesting that raw, violent competition was eating into profits. You proposed a joint clearing system to integrate competitors' logistics networks into your own map. This move made you a target, but it also punched your ticket into the inner circle. Your life shifted into overdrive. You were sent to the Golden Triangle and the Andes to deal directly with the raw producers. You traded your cheap suits for tactical vests. In jungle labs 10,000 feet up, you realized the greatest danger wasn't the government army, but betrayal from your own kind. During a meeting with a Colombian supplier, an intel leak led to a raid on your villa by local special forces. Bullets sprayed through the hallways. Plaster dust filled the air. Your bodyguards dropped one by one. In that moment, you didn't dive for the armored bunker. You grabbed a discarded assault rifle and charged straight at the terrified supplier. You grabbed him by the collar and forced him to sign a long-term exclusivity deal before the fire consumed the room. By the time you walked out of the jungle covered in blood, you realized you no longer felt fear. The survival instinct that had made you tremble in the warehouse had evolved into a pathological craving for total control. You became a regional agent, controlling supply chains across 3 countries. 5 years later, you're standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of a Miami penthouse. Your assets have grown beyond measure. Your shell companies hold controlling stakes in small banks, and your every word can sway local election results. Your life is an endless game of chess. You never touch the powder yourself, but at your command, tons of cargo move through the seabed, the stratosphere, and diplomatic pouches. Eventually, you reached the inevitable moment. The old godfather died in a coup, or perhaps you personally sent him to prison. You took the throne. You are the head of this global network. You control the livelihoods of tens of thousands and the death warrants of just as many. Your life has reached its peak, but you have fallen into absolute loneliness. Your apartment is lined with state-of-the-art signal jammers. You don't even dare call your mother because every signal could be a beacon for a drone missile. You realize that a kingpin is, in essence, just a prisoner in a golden cage. You have no friends. Your most trusted lieutenant is an orphan you raised yourself, but even when he hands you coffee, you instinctively watch for a tremor in his hand. You sleep only 4 hours a day, spending the rest of your time poring over dry reports, looking for the slightest hint of betrayal. The risks didn't disappear as you rose, they just became more lethal. You used to worry about street thugs. Now you worry about Interpol extraditions, financial sanctions, and the ambitious young lions within your own ranks. During a routine global video conference, you noticed an abnormal fluctuation in profits from a Southeast Asian branch. You dug into the raw entry logs and found a young clerk had reported a fake cargo loss. You stared at the photo of that young man on the screen. His eyes reminded you of yourself 20 years ago. Poor, calm, looking for a crack in the wall of despair. You should have ordered his execution, nipping that instability in the bud. But you hesitated. You didn't issue the hit. You picked up your expensive fountain pen and wrote a single line in the command column. Bring him to me. Tell him this industry needs people who know how to hedge risk. You leaned back in your chair, watching the city lights through the window. In that moment, you didn't feel a sense of accomplishment but a profound exhaustion. You realized you hadn't conquered the world. You had simply become part of this massive, rotting cycle. You created the next version of yourself, and this young man will eventually climb to the top through blood and calculation, only to sit in a room this cold, enduring, endless suspicion. The pressure never lets up. In this chair, every breath comes at a price. You hear faint footsteps outside the door, and your hand instinctively drifts toward the hidden button under your desk. The challenge never ends. In this game of power, blood, and money, there is no exit button. Your life, built on one shift schedule after another, one secret envelope after another, one lethal decision after another, has completed its leap from nobody to the pinnacle of power. You won the whole world, only to find you lost your soul back in that warehouse at 3 a.m. The night is still young. On the distant coastline, a freighter full of secrets is slowly pulling into port. You know that new decisions are waiting, and the consequences will be borne by 1,000 versions of you.